Again, everybody, and as you can probably tell, this cold still hasn't gone away, so I'm very croaky today. I feel a bit like someone who's going through one of the warden's procedures, with this wheezer right behind me. Obviously, by the way, they don't have flowers in their hair. That's just Floyd. I think he looks rather fetching. Alex and Z are in solitary confinement, and they have been kind of approached and contacted by a mutated ex-prisoner called Simon, who lives in the tunnels. And he says there's a war going on inside Furnace. The rats, these kind of mutated creatures, are trying to defeat the black suits and the warden. It's a great big kind of ongoing battle going on in the tunnels beneath Furnace, and Alex and Z are trying to work out a plan for how to escape, and Simon has brought them out their cells and he's taken them to the infirmary. The infirmary is where all the prisoners from the prison get taken if they get injured, and terrible things happen to them in there, because that's kind of the wheezer's domain. And Alex and Z have found a few prisoners in beds, all unconscious, including Gary. And there was a wheezer asleep until Z knocked over a big tray of equipment, and now the wheezer has just woken up. That was me coughing, by the way. It wasn't my impression of a wheezer, although they're very similar. I'll do my best to get through it. Okay. Specimens, and the wheezer is now lurching towards them. They're hiding behind one of the curtains in one of the beds. No. The voice in my head never got the chance to break free from between my lips. I was too scared to find the breath to speak, my shell-shocked brain forgetting how to form words. It was happening again. I was trapped and powerless as a wheezer approached, just like on the night before we made our break. I pictured it stopping on the other side of the curtain, its piggy eyes lighting up when it sensed us trembling inside. Visitors. Intruders, specimens. I felt a hand on my shoulder, hot fingers singeing my skin. Simon was there, a finger on his lips, and the rest of his face a mask of fear. I turned to Z, so pale he could have been transparent against the white curtains that separated us from the rest of the infirmary. The wheezer's steps grew closer, scuffed against the smooth rock of the floor. I heard the sound of it convulsing, the needle strapped to its chest clinking and its leather coat flapping. I wanted to check the cubicle for something we could use as a weapon, but I knew that if I turned away for a second, I'd look back to see it peering through the curtains, the stitches of its gas mask straining as its face split open into a smile. A shadow sprouted up from the bottom of the screen. I could make out the dome of its head, the curve of the pipe once more fastened into a tank on its back. The dark shape grew as the wheezer came to a halt on the other side of the curtain. A meter, maybe two, separating us from it. It took a long, ragged breath, its asthmatic hiss like an ancient, scratched recording of a string quartet. Then it unleashed its hellish cry, so loud that the sound was like a dagger in my ears. Something answered it. I thought at first it was an echo, but the distant scream repeated itself, and the wheezer in the infirmary returned the call. It reminded me of vultures announcing the location of a new corpse on which to feast, or three in this case. I glanced at Simon again, hoping he'd take on the wheezer with the same fearlessness with which he'd attacked the rat. But he was petrified, his eyes stretched so wide they were more vain than anything else. Veins that pulsed black rather than red. Right now he didn't look like he could tie his own shoes, let alone take down the wheezer. Correction. Wheezers. I heard the second freak walk into the room. It must have come from the other door. Its footsteps hurried. The silhouette before us made a noise like it was choking, which morphed into a wet gurgle, almost a purr. And seconds later, we heard it in stereo. The longer we waited, the more danger we were in. If we moved now, we might just make it past the first wheezer, and the second was approaching from the far side of the room. I'd never seen them move faster than a stagger. I was pretty sure they couldn't sprint. If we just started running, surely we could make it. But my muscles were carved from stone. I might as well have been strapped to a bed for all the good they were doing me. I could no more take a single step than start singing Jailhouse Rock at the top of my voice. The shadow on the screen moved, coming closer, a hand reaching out for the curtains, ready to draw them back. Only it never did. Instead, the wheezer made another noise, halfway between a gulp and a murmur, its unsteady arm pointing down. Then it turned, becoming smaller, fuzzier around the edges as it shuffled away from us. I could just about see bend over, long limbs reaching for the equipment that littered the floor. Then it moved on again and vanished. The three of us waited for what must have been a full minute before daring even to take a breath. Only when the sound of the wheezer's boots had retreated to the other side of the room did I give my lungs permission to work. Sucking in so much oxygen, the world started spinning. Simon nodded his head towards the side of the cubicle. There was a slight gap between the screen and the back wall, easily big enough for us to squeeze through. If it was the same all the way down, then we should be able to sneak back to the infirmary door without being seen. I checked Z to make sure he knew what we were doing, but he was staring behind me, his eyes wide pools that shimmered in the rusty night. The corners of his mouth turned down so much it was as if they'd been caught by invisible hooks. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what Z was looking at, what had sent him reeling across the room minutes ago. But I did anyway. At first, I didn't recognise him. He wasn't in a bed like the other kids I'd seen. He was strung up in some kind of coffin, a sarcophagus of black metal tilted back against the wall at a 45-degree angle. The straps that held him in place weren't made of leather but of steel, as wide and as thick as my fist, and manacles bound his hands and feet like something from the Middle Ages. It was easy to see why. Donovan had been big before, but now he was enormous. Well, parts of him were. His torso looked like a rag doll that had been overstuffed, his stomach and chest swollen up so much that the stitches that ran from his navel to his sternum and across from armpit to armpit looked like they might tear loose at any time. The muscles beneath flexed with a life of their own, the shapes bulging through his weakened skin. One of his legs was also much larger than the other, the size and colour of a tree trunk. The sutures here were fresher, droplets of blood still winding lazily towards the floor. His face was just how I remembered it, although greyer. Even though his brown eyes were now silver, staring blindly up at the shadowed ceiling, it was unmistakably him. Donovan, I breathed. I reached up, rested a hand on his arm, only to pull it back a split second later because of the heat that radiated from him. Simon was tugging at my overalls, desperate to pull us away, but for a moment even my fear of the wheezers paled as I called out his name again. Still a whisper, but louder this time. Donovan. "Come on!" came a breath in my ear. Both ears, actually, as Simon and Z had spoken the same words at the same time. I ignored them, reaching out and touching Donovan's arm again. This time, he seemed to stir, his head easing around, then lolling against his chest. His silver gaze found me for a moment, then slipped away. His mouth opened. It seemed like it opened too far, and a long, low groan slid out. It changed at the end, becoming a word. "Alex!" Too soft to be heard by the wheezers, but loud enough to break my heart. "Is that you?" "Yeah," I replied, my grin stretching from ear to ear, but the tears still falling. Yeah, it's me and Z too. Hey, D, said Z, stepping up. You came back, he said, his voice soft and slurred. You came back for me. I told you we would, I said. We're going to escape, Donovan. All of us, I promise. We'll get you out of this thing. I'd already started pulling at the steel buckles when I felt Simon's hand on my arm, more insistent this time. You can't take him, he said. We can pull these loose, I argued as quietly as I could, or pick the locks. We can get him out. It won't do any good, Simon went on. It's too late. It's not too late, I snapped, too loud. The sound of feet from the other side of the room kicked up again, that chilling purr, like a cat with a throat full of blood. I froze, but my outburst seemed to have gone unnoticed in a fresh round of groans and sobs that emanated from the hidden infirmary beds. It's not too late, I spat into his ear. He's coming with us, so help me open these chains. It's not the chains, Simon explained, pointing to the side of the sarcophagus. I hadn't noticed the IV drips there. Another bag of blood, and two more filled with darkness and light. The mixture reminded me of space and the galaxies that spiralled in the abyss. I followed the tube, saw where it entered Donovan's neck and arm, the arteries there pulsing black beneath the sheen of his dark skin. If you stop the feed now, he'll die. After everything he's gone through, after the surgery, that stuff is all that's keeping him alive. Are we getting out of here or what? Donovan said, his voice so weak it sounded like a radio with poor reception, fading in and out. I feel like battered crap. We can take it with us, I said, talking to Simon. Take that feed, whatever it is. It won't be enough, the kid replied, looking nervously behind him to check the wheezer hadn't made its way back to the curtain. He needs to stay. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So why did you bring us here? I said, my temper almost fraying again. It was all I could do not to scream my frustration at him, wheezers or no wheezers. Simon sighed. Then he looked down at the floor. Because I wanted you to know that it was too late for your friend. I wanted you to focus on getting us out of here. I'm sorry. Something in my chest seemed to wither up, pushing into my throat where it sat there as uncomfortable as broken glass. I wrenched my arm free of Simon's grip and tried once again to unclip the metal straps that held Donovan's legs. They didn't budge. Somewhere in the infirmary a pair of curtains were drawn back, a dry wheeze broken into what sounded like soft chuckles. Too close. Alex, said Donovan again, are you just going to stand there? Listen to me, Donovan, I said. We will get you free, okay? But we can't do it yet. I remembered what Monty had told me. Don't forget your name, okay? Carl Donovan. Just hang in there. We'll be back for you real soon. Hang in there, echoed Donovan, smiling. His metallic eyes swung back and forth before finding me again, and I realised he was probably doped up on painkillers or something. Good one, Alex. I'll just hang around right here. Just think about that burger, okay, big guy? I went on. Simon was already squeezing between the back of the screen and the wall, Z hot on his heels and beckoning me on. I followed, Donovan's smile fading as he watched me go. Alex, don't leave me. I'll be back. I promise. We're just down the hall. We're not going far. I reached the wall, Donovan trying to twist his neck around to watch me. This time it felt as though my heart had been crushed, but I had no choice. On my life, I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere without you. Then I ducked past the screen, Donovan's great, heaving sobs following me all the way. Poor Donovan. Excuse me. Abandoned. I don't know what was more of a relief. The fact that there was enough room for us to pass through the dozen or so cubicles without difficulty, or the fact that only one of the beds was occupied. It was the next but one from Donovan's, a kid a few years younger than me. He was awake and uninjured, his body strapped down and covered with a sheet, but his mind was obviously in a better place than this, his eyes barely even acknowledging us as we passed by. I wanted, more than anything, to free him, to take him with us, to take them all with us. For a fleeting moment, I pictured myself running out and fighting the wheezers, tearing off their masks, felling the black suits with a single blow, then smashing my way up to the surface with all the lost boys of Furness in my wake. But even as I thought it, I realised how pathetic it sounded, and instead I followed Simon and Z as they eased around the bed, my body slumped, heavy, useless. Not before I noticed another trolley of equipment, however, a torturous kit of stainless steel lying by the boy's bed, all sharpened blades and hooks and clamps. Instinctively, I lifted a scalpel from the tray, sliding it into the waistband of my overalls as we squeezed through the gaps left by the last few screens. We emerged against the wall we'd come in through, the main door visible maybe 5 metres away. Simon crept to the end of the screen, easing himself around the corner to check the infirmary before turning back to us. "Wheezers have gone," he whispered. "Must be in the cubicles or something. Follow me and keep quiet." We did as we were told, jogging across the polished floor. The plastic curtain of the infirmary slapped shut behind us, imitating the soft patter of our feet as we made our way back to solitary. It was as we reached the junction that led back to our cells that we heard voices, too deep, too loud to be anything other than black suits. Simon cursed, his pace quickening. "I thought we'd have more time," he said, bending down to flip open Z's door as if it weighed nothing. "Get in!" Z looked reluctant, but he didn't argue, vanishing once again into the gloom. The voices were getting louder, and I recognised the growl of the dogs too. I didn't particularly fancy another eternity locked in the hole, but there was nothing else for it. I nodded at Simon as he held open my hatch for me like a butler. Then I jumped in. He paused before closing it. "I'm sorry about your friend," he said. "I hope you understand why I did it. He's gone, Alex. He's turned. Next time I come, we focus on getting out. Okay?" He didn't wait for me to reply, just eased down the hatch, then slowly slid the lever across. It was only seconds after the sound of his feet faded that I heard the familiar stomp of the black suits. There was the squeal of a lever, and I thought I could make out a shout of distress, then a dull thump. Someone else must have been brought into solitary. Some other poor soul banished to the hole to be tortured by his own demons. I wondered who it was, whether I knew him. It was probably a gang member from Gen Pop, one of the Skulls or 59ers, punished for trying to break out. I listened to see if I could hear anything, but the solid walls did their job well, immersing me in lightless silence. I slid the scalpel from my overalls and tentatively felt the blade. It was wickedly sharp, the faintest touch leaving a hairline cut on my skin that wasn't deep enough to bleed, which still stung. I didn't really know what I could use it for. It was too small to leave more than a scratch on a black suit, and sure as hell wasn't going to let me tunnel my way free. But it felt good to have it. Made me feel a little less feeble in the face of Furness. Tucking it into the corner of my cell, where I wouldn't accidentally slice my hand off, I curled up on the floor, too exhausted to do anything else. We'd only been in the infirmary for a few minutes, but it seemed like hours. Every sick detail carved into my brain. I saw Gary. Knew that when those bandages were removed, he too would have eyes of cold silver. And I saw Donovan, his body morphed almost beyond recognition. His soul trapped inside a casket of mutated flesh and growing weaker with every second. If we didn't do something soon, then he would be gone forever, a prisoner inside himself as he became a monster, a black suit. It took me a while to notice that I wasn't alone in my cell. Tilting my head up, I made out a familiar cloud that seemed to hover above me. I blinked, and it swirled into a rough shape, that of a boy sitting against the wall, knees curled up to his chin. But it didn't seem to want to focus. I knew why, and the thought of it made me wish the shape away, pray to be left alone. But my imagination was adamant that I had company. "That's charming," Donovan's voice ebbed around the cell, or at least it ebbed around my head. "A little cosmetic surgery and you can't even stand to look at your old mate." I tucked my head into my arms, screwed my eyes closed, but he was still there. Not laughing at my jokes anymore, either, I see. They've killed you, I said, speaking the words aloud, even though I knew I didn't need to. Whoa, he shouted back. Not yet, they haven't. I'm still in there somewhere. I just look a little different, that's all. His voice became urgent. Don't give up on me yet, Alex. I won't, I said, sitting up and staring at the blurred shape, a figure on the other side of frosted glass. I'm not. I made you a promise. I'll get you out. Good, kid, because I really didn't look too hot back there. I don't know. A little bit more effective than going to the gym, I replied with a twitch of a smile. The image seemed to solidify for a moment, its chest exploding outwards, stomach hardening to a grotesque cluster of cramped muscles, one leg swollen up like a victim of elephantiasis. Elephantiasis? I don't know how you say it. Donovan's eyes glinted back, half metal and half moonlight, and he flexed his arms. You've got a point there, he said. Hope they do my arms too, though, or I'm going to be as lopsided as your new mate Simon. Yeah, he's got a pretty unique look. We laughed, but it was forced. Donovan's body deflated like a balloon, returning to its original size. It didn't stop there, continuing to shrink as the hallucination spoke. Find a way, Alex. Get us the hell out of here. What if I can't? I asked the figure, now nothing more than a thread of light that hung from the invisible ceiling like a spider's web. You can, was all it said. Then it was gone. I wasn't feeling too positive about escaping, but some part of my mind seemed to be holding out hope. Somewhere deep inside my subconscious, I must have had faith in myself. And why not? I mean, I had found a way out of Furnace. Okay, it hadn't got us very far, but we'd got out of Gen Pop. We'd beaten it. I tried to remember how I'd felt standing on the lip of the chasm in room 2, the rock still smoking, the river raging beneath us like our own private expressway home. For all we knew, we were about to die, but we'd done it. We'd cracked the prison open like an egg, and for that moment at least, we'd been free. The memory of those feelings was still there, a faint and insubstantial ghost of an emotion rather than the real thing, but I could still taste it. I wanted it again. I wanted to be standing on the edge of freedom, knowing that all it would take to get out was one simple step. And I would find a way. I swore to myself right then and there that I would split the prison open once again, and that this time there would be no doubts, no uncertainty about our fate. There would only be the outside world and us in it, drenched in sunlight and warmth, and gulping down burgers by the beach. You've got me started now, I said to the empty space where Donovan had been, imagining chunks of salty beef and thick mayo and moist bread and burnt onions sliding down my throat, the wind in my hair and the sound of seagulls as they dived for our scraps. Oh yes, I'd do it. The next time Simon came, I'd find our way out. Only Simon didn't come. I waited patiently, so patiently, counting the seconds as they passed, the minutes, then the hours. At one point I heard footsteps again and got myself ready, hoping that the hatch would open and Simon's face would appear. But they passed overhead and vanished. I kept counting, rocking my head back and forth with each passing beat to try to keep track of the time. It was just about the most monotonous thing I'd ever done in my life, but it kept my mind busy, kept the bad thoughts away. And I was counting towards something. I knew it wouldn't be long before the kid reappeared. At least, I thought I knew. I lost count somewhere over 15,000, thrown off stride by the sound of Z from the next cell. I calculated the time even as I decoded his message, the clank of his grill against the pipe knocking out even more seconds. 4 hours. It had felt like 40. Think Dee's okay? He asked. I wondered why he'd waited so long to get in touch. Maybe he'd been asleep. He will be, I banged back, the wounds on my hand opening up again as the grill smashed against the toilet pipe. When we're out. I hope so, came Z's reply. Are you okay? Just dandy, I struck, laughing as I did so, waiting for Simon. There was a pause, then the muted metallic thuds started up again. Suppose he's been caught? I'd been trying not to consider that possibility. Of all of us, Simon was the most at risk, spiriting through the passageways of Furness's underbelly, where the black suits or the wheezers or the warden could find him at any time, then retreating to whatever hole he'd found, praying that the rats didn't sniff him out. Like he'd said, his life was in danger every time he came to release us. I was amazed he'd lasted as long as he had. He'll be back, I replied eventually, ignoring my own doubts. It won't be long. But it was. I started the count from scratch. 3,600 seconds in every hour. 3,600, 7,200, 10,800. After which I drifted off, dreaming of Donovan in the infirmary, screaming numbers at me as if they were a combination to unlock the restraints that held him. The sound of the hatch woke me, and I sat up, my heart lifting, waiting for Simon to appear. But the door didn't open. Something was scratching at the lever, something with claws rather than fingers, something that panted and growled as it tried to dig its way to me. It was a rat, all bloody claws and lamprey mouth. I scrabbled for the scalpel, luck letting me grab it by the handle as I shot to my feet. There was a thump, the thick metal hatch buckling inwards a fraction. Another impact, another dent. It wasn't much, but I knew the door couldn't withstand an onslaught like this for long. I prayed for the black suits to appear, to shoot the thing that was trying to get in. But I soon regretted it. The sound of scratching became the unmistakable racket of a scuffle, a grunt followed by a scream, and then a crunch as something else slammed into the hatch. I stood there, scalpel by my side, fear for my life the only thing keeping me upright. I heard the lever grinding open. Then the hatch was ripped outwards. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw the outline of Simon, the pinpricks of his eyes so bright they looked like holes in his head where the light was streaming through. Then the outline lashed out, catching me around the head with its clubbed fist. Fireworks exploded in front of my eyes, and my legs gave out. That probably saved my life. The rat lunged into my cell, its clawed arms like some living combine harvester that churned the air. I curled up as tightly as I could, hands over my head, the scalpel dropped and lost. Warm spit and a retching growl dripped down on me, and I waited for the next blow, the one that would finish me. But it never came. Instead, I heard the throb of thunder, the booming laugh of a black suit. "What do you think?" came the voice, so thick, so powerful that it cut right through the squeals of the rat. I risked a look up, saw the creature halfway into my cell, its mouth so wide that its jaw looked dislocated, rows of teeth like broken glass embedded in its gums. It saw me watching it and lunged again, but something was holding it back. A fist locked tight around its throat. My eyes drifted past the thrashing beast, saw the immaculate suit beyond, the shark's grin. The black suit loosened his grip, and the rat sank deeper, its claws so close I could smell them like trash left too long in the sun. "No one would ever know," the black suit went on, pulling the rat back, then dropping it again. "Everyone knows the vermin like to get in the cells, help themselves to some fresh meat. This one would have had you already if I hadn't come along." The rat tried to squirm around, biting at the gloved hand that held it. The black suit simply bunched up his other fist and struck out, the blow causing the creature's head to snap back, blood dripping. It shook itself, obviously stunned, then resumed its efforts to reach me. "So, should I drop it in? Let you get to know each other? Who knows, you might have been friends already up in Gen Pop." More laughter, like a storm was raging above my cell. The black suit lowered the rat even further, and I felt a searing heat on my arm where its claws had drawn blood. There was a snap, like a bear trap, inches from my ear as its jaws closed in. Then it was gone, hauled out of the hatch, back into the corridor. I peered up through trembling fingers, saw the black suit wedge his shotgun into the rat's waist, and pull the trigger. The corridor flashed for a second, the lightning once more followed by a dull rumble of laughter. "The warden wants you left alone for a month," the guard said, leaning over the opening. "But he doesn't call all the shots around here. Next time, you might not be so lucky." He kicked the hatch shut. For once, I was thankful for the darkness, which hid the crimson beads that pattered like gentle rain to the floor of my cell. Oh, poor Alex. We're nearly there. So we've got about 85 pages left. There's only about like 10 chapters left. The next chapter is called The Lost Boys, and then the one after that is called The Steeple. We'll come to them tomorrow. And oh my goodness, I'm just reminding myself there's some pretty horrible stuff coming up. Sorry again about this. This cold should go soon. It's rubbish. I hope you're all well. Thank you very much. Oh, and I should have some cough drops. Yes, thank you very much. I think it was Ethan who suggested cough drops. I will try and get some, but the shops aren't really open or accessible. So, yes, I will try that tomorrow if I can get some. I hope you're all okay. And I hope you can all hear me okay today. And come back tomorrow and we will carry on with the horrors of Furnace Penitentiary. Bye.